For more on the Michigan situation, we are joined now by our old friend and original sports reporters panelist, the longtime Detroit Free Press columnist, the great Mitch Albom. Mitch, thank you so much for joining us. And we were talking to Pete Thamel and Dan Wetzel and your colleague at the Free Press, Tony Garcia, about this situation. For you, what's been uppermost in your mind the last 5 days?
Well, the saddest thing is that this went from something that we see in college coaching, with affairs, extramarital affairs, and that being a fireable offense, to something that became much more tragic, because of the reaction to it. And all of a sudden seeing the image of a college coach, particularly a Michigan coach, sitting in a small, apparently padded cell, answering questions and being told to stay away from somebody. That takes on almost a different level of tragic. And I wrote in a column for the Free Press that the days of thinking that your school is above something around here or probably anywhere else in this country are pretty much gone. And that's sad.
This situation, you said, I think the words were stunning, but not shocked, right?
Well, why should we be shocked? I mean, Hugh Freeze, Rick Pitino, Bobby Petrino, the number of coaches who have ended up losing their jobs or getting in trouble because of extramarital affairs is way longer than you and I have time to run through. But what I think adds to a level here is how long this went on for, and apparently Sherrone Moore's biggest problem was that this woman apparently ended it. And he had a problem. I mean, it would seem to me you'd be grateful that, maybe we didn't get caught. This was apparently going on for a very long time. So the brazenness with which this continued to go on, with which he denied it, and just continued to figure, I'm going to have my job and coach Michigan. It's the assumption of that I think turns people off in all situations, not just here in Michigan, that you think, well, I'll just keep getting away with it. And there'll be no accountability. And the truth is, Jeremy, let's be honest, there hasn't been a lot of accountability here at Michigan for several things. I mean, from the Connor Stallions thing and the Harbaugh thing and previous issues that have gone on. Who's really been fired? Who's lost their job? They missed games, but there hasn't been someone say we don't put up with this here at Michigan. So perhaps that led Sherrone Moore to think, well, the key is not getting caught or not getting caught too much. And obviously he found out that that's not true.
What had been Sherrone Moore's reputation around Michigan before this?
I would say that the jury was still sort of out on Sherrone Moore. I think that if you really go back to his ascent, it was more like Jim Harbaugh caught people by surprise, left. And it was like, well, we've got a good thing going here. We've got to keep it. Sherrone Moore coached several games where Jim was absent. And, he's already here, knows the program, knows the recruiting. We're on a high. Let's give him the job. And then, of course, in his first year, he loses more than the acceptable number of games. It seems like anything more than one anymore in a major college program gets you in trouble. And then by beating Ohio State, it's sort of, you know what that means around here, that buys you currency. All of a sudden, he loses to Ohio State this year. Now it's just a year with too many losses and a loss to Ohio State. And suddenly there's a lot of people around here who were before this happened were going, was he really the right move? Was that too fast? Maybe they should have gotten somebody with a little more experience to run a major program like Michigan. I would be lying if I said to you that there weren't people around here, sadly, cynically, who were going, well, maybe that's not the way we wanted to get rid of him, but, now we can move on to somebody with more pedigree. We'll see if Michigan actually does that.
We know there's an investigation now, Jenner and Block. It's going to continue that investigation. We don't know exactly how far it will reach, who's going to be questioned. But Ward Manuel right now, and Dan Wetzel was just saying, look, we can talk about accountability. We can talk about oversight, but Sherrone Moore is alleged to have done this. Sherrone Moore is alleged to have done that. Where do you think Ward Manuel fits into this discussion right now?
I think it's not just Sherrone Moore. I think it's the totality of the things that have happened under Ward Manuel. going back to, like I say, the Connor Stallion situation, how Jim Harbaugh, some of his behavior was tolerated. I think there are forces at Michigan that don't like to be in the news this way. And they are feeling like they are in the news a little bit too much this way. Now, they don't want the program to completely fall apart, and they want somebody there who can help hire a new coach. So I think when you started to hear word about Ward Manuel being fired, which we heard around here, and then that was quickly dispelled, I think that there are forces at Michigan that feel that would just disassemble the program too much, and it would be too hard to come back. Whether after he hires a new coach, he isn't part of this big review, and this review says, it's a culture of allowance, and allowing the coaches, as long as they win, to get away with too much. Perhaps that will be their conclusion. I don't know. I like Ward as I like Sherrone, and I like Jim, but the record is the record, and people in Michigan don't like to be embarrassed that way, the higher ups anyhow.
Mitch, you've been covering college sports at a high level for 4 decades. You've been around Michigan for 4 decades. We're in a totally different world right now in 2025 in college sports, right? Unrecognizable compared to what it was 3 or 4 years ago, much less 4 decades ago. But when you think about the arc, the evolution of college sports to where we are now, how does this story fit into the context of those changes?
Well, first of all, I think of Bo Schembechler, who was the first coach that I covered at Michigan, and I wrote his book with him. If he were here looking at college sports, he'd never stop throwing up. I mean, it's just, it's so unrecognizable to what he, the noon games and the team, and the idea that one of the first things I heard when Sherrone Moore was dismissed was, oh my God, Bryce Underwood's going to get stolen away for more money from another school.
Quarterback.
Yeah, quarterback of Michigan. That was like the first thing I heard. I was like, okay, things have really changed. And in the context, to answer your question, that is the kind of thing that schools have to worry about now. They have to worry that if there's a dent in their armor, it can mean that boosters from other schools will contact players and say, you don't want to be there. That program's going to fall apart. We'll offer you this money. And that player can say, okay, I'm on my way. Coaches, the same thing. Let's face it, Michigan's probably going to take a coach away from an existing program where that school thinks that they have a coach. And now that coach is going to say, sorry, Michigan's calling. And then someone's going to have to replace that coach. So in that context, as you say, of what the world is today, it's a business, Jeremy. And when Bo was coaching and when I was going out there at noon games, it's still, there were still recruiting scandals and things like that. And there were still bad actors. But there was a semblance of playing for your school, being a student athlete, not looking at it as a springboard just to the NFL. Those days are gone. And you and I can lament them all we want. They're still going to be gone when we're done lamenting.
Michigan is obviously one of the great academic institutions on the planet as well.
Yes, it is.
So at a place like Michigan, for people who don't understand, and it's got the most wins in college football history, et cetera, why does football matter so much? And it might be obvious, but I'm just asking the question. Why does football matter so much?
Well, there's a tradition of excellence. I think any school that has a tradition of excellence in anything, why does basketball matter so much at Duke? It's been excellent there for so many years versus, I don't know, some other sport, But I also think there's an enormous alumni association of Michigan. Michigan actually sells more merchandise on the alumni thing than I think any school. Maybe Notre Dame is up there, but it's 1 and 2. And it is a thing that pulls everybody together. You can fit a lot of people in a 110,000 seat stadium. And so it's the thing that everybody comes back for. It's the annual gathering. It's you come in for the homecoming, you come for the Ohio State game. And it, people around the world put on their Michigan jerseys or sweatshirts or caps on Saturday mornings and watch from Dubai and watch from Australia and watch because that's where they went and they feel a connection to it. It is, at its purest form, a nice thing. It's a nice thing to want to be part of your school and your alumni and be connected to all these people, and you see somebody wearing a Michigan hat in an airport and you go up to them and say, go blue, go blue. Unfortunately, it now comes with a lot of overtones that are less than desirable. And it's not just Sherrone Moore, it is Connor Stalions, it's Robert Anderson and that whole scandal that happened a few years back. And, and unfortunately, a lot of colleges have this. Hardly Michigan, when I wrote my column, we live in a state where there's Michigan State. And when something bad happens to one, the other one snickers, Nobody can snicker. Michigan State, Mel Tucker, Larry Nassar, you're not snickering at anybody. Michigan, now with this, and they shouldn't be snickering at anybody. What they should be doing, both of them, is looking at how do we achieve the high standard in athletics that we have achieved in academics. And that means behavior as well as success. And I hope they do that in their next hire.
Mitch Albom from the Detroit Free Press. Welcome back on the Sports Reporters. It's always a privilege.
If I could have done the Sports Reporters from my office for 20-something years, I probably would have been on more often.
You're welcome to.
Possible.
We would love to have you from your office anytime, as you well know, Mr. Albom.
That's very nice, Jeremy. Good to see you.
Thank you.